Hello there, and welcome to the I Never Knew podcast, also known as Inc. This show dives into the life experiences of people who have been through it all and have come through the other side stronger, better, and triumphant. Each story is raw, authentic, and, at times, heartbreaking. One thing joins it all together: the fact that the stories can help the listener learn and grow. Hosted by life coach Maureen, she sits down each episode with a new guest who will empower the listener to set out on their self-discovery journey and start to heal. Now you'll be joined by Maureen and her special guest. Please enjoy the show.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of I Never Knew But My Dog Did podcast. I am Maureen Scanlon, your host, or Life Coach Maureen, as most of you know me. I'm really excited today. I was just telling my next guest, it's not lost on me, the irony of what the subject is, what his story is, and the fact that today is July 4th, Independence Day, and represents freedom. Of course, this is not going to release until, later another day, but I think the stars align when they need to. And I think this subject is so interesting. It's something I've never covered. And just reading Sean's story to me, it jumped off the page and said, we've got to talk to him and really deep dive into some issues that are going on into this world that you wouldn't think still happen today. You think we would be a little more evolved. So let me tell you about my amazing guest, Sean Parker. He is a writer, an artist, and an academic working in the areas of culture, stammering, and justice reform. He's published 10 books, released 10 albums, and has even given a TED Talk, Stammering and Creativity, in Istanbul when he was living there in 2013. He is the editor of False Allegations Watch, a division of Dr. Michael Naughton's Empowering the Innocent organization, which is affiliated with the University of Bristol. They publish articles and interviews of those claiming to have been falsely accused and whose cases have been ignored in other media. He wrote his latest book titled Compelling Speech, The Stammering Enigma, and he wrote this while he was at Dartmoor Prison in the UK as a prisoner maintaining innocence, and it is a reflection of how people who stammer are seen in society and where the condition comes from. So we have sort of a twofold where we have like this understanding of cancel culture and the way that we're viewed, and then also the false accusations that can come to innocent people. And as a true crime lover, because I'm enthralled in everything psychology and especially criminal psychology, the true crime arena, I think, has become so popular, and we tend to jump on people just because we want to see justice, whether it's the right person or not. And so we're going to definitely address that. So without further ado, hi, Sean, and thank you so much for being here.
Hi, Maureen. Thank you so much for that wonderful intro. Brilliant. Thank you.
I love it. I love that you're here. Of course, I always love a British accent. So there's a bonus for today. So here at Inc., we always start off with sort of your knee story. And as humans, we've had many knee stories, but I want to know, where was the moment in your life where you were just in despair and you felt nothing could change and I'm hopeless, and how do I get through this? Tell me about your knee story.
Okay, well, the honest answer to that one is not in the prison experience. It was actually about 25 years ago with the onset of kind of panic attacks and anxious depression, as we'd call it now, after the death of my father. He was 67, heart attack. I was 23, and I started to drink too much. And then that ended up with panic attacks, which ended up in a daily sort of spiral into what you could call despair. It was certainly despairing at times. And what I remembered then was thinking, things will never be as bad as this, which is quite a useful position to sort of, if you survive this, then you'll survive anything kind of thing. And other things did actually reflect back onto that. So that was actually the worst internally.
I so appreciate that, because it's, amazing how these sort of moments in our life, these aha moments where it's like, okay, well, that started. And, panic attacks and anxiety are so prevalent in society, and we do tend to go to addictions to self-soothe and to find a way to get through it. And I love that you said in your questionnaire, it's one of the ways that you learned how to get through the worst of times by saying it can't get any worse than this. It's only up from here.
Yeah.
So let's talk first about your stammering and what that means, what it looks like, and when it started for you.
Well, I've been a stammerer since like the age of 5, I suppose, which would be about sort of 1980 in my case. And but my parents were very linguistic people. My father was a drama lecturer at Exeter University, and my mum was a speech therapist, which is always quite ironic for people.
Right? Very helpful
So,
too.
well, you think so? And so as we were growing up, there was a lot of English language in the house. So I have a deep love of language, and it's how I earn my money now. I'm an editor and a writer, and I love it.
Yeah.
And I also had a very overbearing. I have a very overbearing older brother, and I don't want to do him down because he was only a kid as well. But he was doing all the speaking, and I was doing all the listening. And when you try to chip in on that, and you get like beaten back each time, not physically, but culturally, you eventually stop trying. And I think I stopped trying, or the block started to develop at that point. My parents spotted it and didn't really know what to do about it, despite their jobs. And it developed. It doesn't stick with all kids. With almost everybody, with almost all other kids who stutter, it kind of goes away, but it doesn't for some of us. So that's how it started.
That's fascinating. And I have heard this before, from other speech therapists, that, and a lot of those things that happen are mental. It starts off psychologically. It's not just this physical thing, like there's something anatomically wrong with your tongue or your speech, but it's a psychological thing. And when we have children, I noticed by my third child, my older children were 6 and 8 by the time he was born, and they just spoke for him. And so I think that happens a lot in families. So how did your parents begin to help you, and how did it hinder you through life that made you now be such an advocate for everybody?
Right. They were the honest answer to it is that they were quite sort of self-involved, and they had their own problems.
Mm-hmm.
This is the 80s, and not like lots of other families, they split up halfway through that. Big nasty divorce got in the papers. It was so grisly, and my mum wanted to keep me, but the parents were splitting between me and my brother. So we were asked by custody officers, this kind of thing. It was all very toxic by that point. So the attention wasn't on my speech; it was on their survival. So after that, our dad did the worst thing he could possibly have done, and he took kind of me and my brother off to South Wales, 200 miles, sort of kind of away from my mum, in an act to hurt her. We didn't think at the time, Dad, you're doing a terrible act of coercive control here. That's modern language, but that's actually what was going on. And I'm happy to recognize that in his absence. I love my dad, but I'm happy to say what he did, so that's actually what he did.
Yeah, so that's very good that you recognize that now, and we've mended. But that's interesting because as you're trying to deal with what you're dealing with psychologically, it's just being piled on even more with that kind of an environment that you were in. So how did you help yourself? Did you have school therapists that helped? How do you recognize the signs of this is something that's happening because of my environment, or this is something that needs to be fixed? Because I know a lot of people will say kids outgrow a lot of stuff. Were you faced with that?
Well, it's true, and they do, so I think that's what my parents were hoping. At 14 years of age, it went away for a year. I went to fluency when I started to sing for a band. in the era of sort of Nirvana and things. They hit us quite strongly in Britain, and I started a band. And I was a singer of it, and so that was interesting. It went away, and then it came back a year later, as if to say, "Haha, we're only joking." And you don't have any control over these things, as you know, it's happening invisibly in the tongue. It's not like we want to stammer, so it just came back into life, and I'm like, why? I have no idea. I still don't know why. And after that, it was just a process of gradually working on it. As you become older and a bit more conscious, you're like, this is a thing that I do. I need to. And by 24, by the time I decided I want to be a teacher at some point in my life, I knew it was time to take action, to get therapy.
That's amazing. That's amazing that you had this sort of break for a year, and as a lead singer, which my own belief is that music is so much more powerful than we give it credit for. And I think it's so healing. It also is kind of distracting. You weren't as self-conscious about your speech, I would assume, while you were singing, right?
Oh, that's right. It disappears when you sing. You're thinking out of a different part of your brain. They've almost proven that with various scans and things. It starts to pop in different areas when you sing. And because if I'm talking to you now, I'm concerned about how the information is being received by you. And it doesn't matter on the extent of our relationship or anything. It's just about making sure you receive that. So that's where my stammer will come. With singing, you are just going into another place of, am I with the music? And that completely shortcuts any concern about information. It's not apparently for every stammerer, but it's for everyone that I've ever known. So
wow, I love that. And I'm going to generalize, and shame on me for generalizing, but I feel like it's kind of like how life is. If we just stop overthinking things and just let it flow, sometimes it just flows. And I can appreciate what you said there. Yeah.
I fully agree with you on that. Yeah.
I love that. And then you become this academic, and you actually get up on a TEDx stage, which I think is, hashtag goals for me. And to think that the bravery that you show in pushing through this, because that's what this show is all about, is showing the listeners that there's nothing that's going to be in your way unless you let it be in your way. And so in your TED Talk, what do you speak of? And I want everyone, we're gonna definitely promote that TED Talk so everyone can watch that after the podcast. So what did you talk about in your TED Talk that really advocates for this?
That was actually about 10 years ago now, 2013. And it was called Stammering and Creativity, as you said. And it's essentially about the difference between the right and the left brain when we're speaking. There's a lot of theory about the right left brain, which half of the experts have debunked, but there's a bunch of experts who still agree. And the fact is, they've done the scans, and when we're speaking about certain things, certain areas of the brain pop up and flash. So that it's almost evidence as to what's going on. And what people who stammer, the experts of that, the speech therapists, academics, have worked out is that when we are producing the language in a sensible, factional, information-based way out of the left brain, the right brain sort of attacks it and says, that's inappropriate, you can't be doing that. So, and there's this kind of a clash in the meaning. I can't feel it and it's not painful, but that's actually what's going on inside. So it's in trying to interfere with the sensible production of speech, basically. The chaotic kind of right brain, which is more spacey and hippified. The left brain doesn't like that. So in a sense, the stammer is quite balanced, and it's trying to handle the two parts, which in most people are much more kind of biased towards one or the other. That's essentially what the talk was about, and also about how it's picked up in culture. So I've repeated that kind of sort of in the book here.
Yes, I love that so much. And you're right. I've actually done an interview with a guest who was like, there's no left and right brain. And I would disagree as well, only from my own experience. I've recently got certified in coaching for autistic clients, as well as studying neurodiversity. And discovered myself, I have high functioning autism myself, formerly known as Asperger's. And so I've now discovered some of these things that I've been doing my whole life. But when I was creative, that's the difference. And you'll see people that are neurodiverse have so much creativity. And like we were saying, I feel like it's when we're truly in ourselves, when we're more in that creative space and we're not overthinking, we're not feeling self-conscious, we're not thinking right and wrong, we're just sort of in the flow of things. And without being able to express my creative side, and my husband laughs because every 3 weeks I have a new hobby, but it really does help me with coping and not being bored and not sort of coming down on myself. You should be doing something, you should be doing something. So thank you for validating that. So let's get into our other side of this, which I am so fascinated by, which is your story about being falsely accused. And this happened at the beginning of the Me Too movement. So tell us your story in relation to that.
Yes. In 2016, a couple of years after I got back from being in Istanbul for 10 years, I was kind of trying to set up again on the English South Coast. And I opened an arts and music venue. So I was very proud of it. It was quite successful for that first year because the town was a bit depressed and didn't have anything like that. So we were happily running it, me and a couple of other kind of managers there. And long story short, as they say, at the Christmas of that year, a couple of days before Christmas, I had a one-night stand with a friend and customer. Between those two things was her role in my life. She was a little bit younger than me, not very, not she was an adult. And the next day, her boyfriend reported me to the police. He was trying to actually join the police, and then I had a 14-month wait on bail before we went to court, and it didn't go my way. I didn't speak in court because of my stammer. I had some problematic advice, and I'm still appealing it now. And I went to prison for 4.5 years, basically. Yeah.
Wow, that's incredible, and it's not an isolated thing, right? Do you think justice comes from, this is my belief, and I know that here in America, I just feel our system, it's a legal system, not a justice system. And I think that it's absolutely broken. And I think there's too much subjectiveness. I was just watching the documentary on JonBenet Ramsey about her mother, Patsy Ramsey, being accused. And people to this day, even after her passing, still think she was guilty. But I think this happens often. And I can't wait to hear, because you're the expert here, these investigators, they get something in their mind and they're so subjective that they miss everything. For instance, with JonBenet Ramsey, they missed DNA, they missed footprints, they missed so much, and they didn't want to look at anything else. They didn't save the integrity of the crime scene, and it destroys lives. And there's no vindication once your reputation is ruined. It's very hard to get that back, and I'm certain that's what you're experiencing. So what do you think, and what is some of the things that you publish articles about in the Empowering the Innocent? What do you find, and what kind of stories do you hear?
Well, absolutely. You sort of touched it kind of on it there in where the police don't actually pursue things in the way that they should. It's because what they do is they case build in effect. They don't actually investigate the way that they either used to or they should do, or the public expects them to. And they do this case building because they are forced from above for conviction targets. I don't know about in America, but we pretty much inherited our entire justice system from America. So I have pretty good reason to think that it does come from there. Yeah. Which is just you put together things through bad character, they call it. So if you don't have any evidence, you can just get a bunch of witnesses to give the impression about a defendant there in the dock. When they're already in the dock, there's already an assumption of guilt. Though the justice system says innocent till proven guilty, that's only words, and it's not actually reality when you're the jury looking at them. Yeah. So if that person doesn't speak for whatever reason, either he's nervous or there is a stammer, or the barrister says if you stammer, that's a sign of guilt. I mean, these are obvious reasons that one would speak. But even if you do, you are having to perform to just a bunch of questions from a lawyer who's like a barrister who's just trying to get a certain set of answers from you. So it's not a real situation like this right now. This is a real situation. Court's not like that, is it? And then if you add the Me Too movement, kind of in the week I was going to trial, Harvey Weinstein was being arrested. He's on TV every single night. So the 9 women jury are going home every night to watch Harvey Weinstein being arrested and then coming to see me again in the morning in the court. I mean, so at that time, it couldn't have been a worse time for me to be tried, but certain elements of society and sort of power ideologues depend on this kind of thing.
Yeah.
Long story short.
Yeah, no, you're so right. I mean, the bias and like you said, the conviction rate, these detectives have these cases and they're expected to close them. And now with the whole shows like 48 hours, they want to find someone and they want to find someone quick within 48 hours, which real investigative work. And I am definitely not anti law enforcement because there are some great law enforcement and lawyers and judges. But unfortunately, it's become more the norm to have those political things that go on, or, and you'll see these cases through the years. If there's a new attorney general, or if there's a new judge on the case, or there's a new mayor in the town. I mean, in the case of JonBenet Ramsey, once there was a new mayor, she said, we absolutely are not, going to arrest her, and we don't believe she's guilty. Your life is so delicately in someone else's hands, and you're just a case number on their desk, and it breaks my heart. I don't know about you, but especially because you work with Empowering the Innocent organization, is it just me, or have they lost a lot of common sense where you and I can look at a case and go, this is so obvious? Like, where's the proof? Where's the evidence? It's not lining up. There's no DNA. There's no forensics. There's no, although we are getting better now with cell phones tracking us everywhere, that is helping us. But in your case, character witnesses don't mean diddly. You could pull 10 of my enemies and make me look like a really bad person, but I have, I have a lot of listeners and a lot of friends out there who would say she wouldn't hurt a fly. So if you're now in appeal with this and having to serve that 4.5 years, what was that like, and how did you get through just sitting in jail thinking, I didn't do this? How is anyone ever going to hear me and understand the truth?
Well, if there's any kind of good thing about going to prison, it's that it's a very disciplining experience. So, and if you're innocent, of course, it helps. And there's lots of guys inside who aren't absolutely innocent, but something kind of went wrong at their trial to make them not beyond reasonable doubt. So there's lots of very spurious cases inside too. Yeah. What I did was to gather my kind of your kind of core self, the inner locus, and because I've always been this creative type, I just started to do a poem every day, a picture every day, to keep things expressed in a positive, creative way. I also kind of wrote a letter all the time, though they didn't really leave the prison very, very easily. And I just kind of got all of my resources together, accidentally became a bit of an expert in this subject. I don't kind of sort of proclaim to be an expert in anything, but the work itself speaks for it, and understood that to believe the victims policy that we've had in Britain for the last sort of 10 years or so was brought in off the back of the Title IX sort of kind of directive that you have kind of in the US, brought in the 70s, but has been enacted particularly since Mr. Obama and Joe Biden signed a certain letter, which makes basically the rape campus culture of the early 2010s industrialized, so that you're just destroying the lives of young men left, right, and center. Certain cases I'm not going to mention them now because your viewers will be sort of, oh, I can't believe he's talking about that one, and that impact will be different in the US and the UK. So, but we cover them here in the lens of our own, and off the back of an American writer called Miss Claire Best, who's amazing on your culture. We've studied a lot of her stuff, applied her logic to lots of English cases to see why so many cases are being put away. 1,400 wrongful convictions a year is the stats for the UK, not just sex cases or all cases, but it's an unbelievable amount because of the things that we're talking about.
Oh my gosh. And what I don't understand is like how backwards some of this stuff is, like the statute of limitations. I don't think there should ever be a statute of limitations on anything. I feel like, you know, if a law was broken and we find proof that the law was broken and we have the evidence to convict, or, you know, even just bring it to trial, for us here in America, the statute of limitations on rape, I think that needs to change. My gosh, that's absolutely, to me, ridiculous. There wouldn't be a statute of limitations on anything, you know. I'm not gender specific, but I just think an assault is assault and a murder is a murder, and a crime broken is a crime broken. I love that you said you found these ways, because as a life coach, I'm always telling people there's a way to cope on the inside, even when the outside seems like a hopeless place to be. And I so appreciate that you're artistic and you drew and you created and you wrote letters. And, you know, that right there is a testimony, listeners, that wherever you are, there you are, and you can be still in a positive mindset, even when things look hopeless and you feel helpless. So let's talk about, how did the stammering affect, do you think, the trial as well as your time in prison and actually feeling hurt?
So kind of, as I've said, I was advised halfway through the trial. I had a witness who was going to stand, who then decided to not stand on that morning. Didn't really understand why, but my barrister came up to me and said, probably best you don't speak because of the stammer. He seemed to have lost all of his optimism in that moment, and I started to lose mine. So that was the start of right, this isn't going well all of a sudden, nightmare. So then I didn't speak. I was stuck being looked at, and 2 days later, the guilty verdict came. And then I said goodbye to my mum from the dock with a wave, and went down to the court cell, and then off to the reception prison, Old Victorian place, for 2 months. So then it was just such a shock, and every morning you're expecting a thing under the door to say, sorry, Mr. Parker, there's been a mistake here, because you know there's no evidence, you don't feel like this person, you don't understand what's happened. But then slowly you realize that's not going to happen quite so easily. So you start to appeal yourself. You start to pull your resources together in your prison tracksuit and pumps and everything. And but back to your question, I actually didn't speak properly, especially not like this we are now, for 6 months inside, because the atmosphere is hostile and suspicious. It doesn't encourage it. People don't like each other. They don't know the reason that you're speaking to them, unless you're just asking for something from a guard, and that's rare. And they'll sort of look at you in a hostile, suspicious way too. So what's the point? So I just went into my own bits and went, well, eventually I'll come back out as myself again, but not yet.
What a double-edged sword too, because when you're quiet, then people are also suspicious. Like, what is he hiding? Why isn't he sharing? Why isn't he telling us what happened? You know, so I mean, my heart, you know, is so empathetic for you, because you just, I could only, I mean, I can't imagine. I haven't been through it, but I can only imagine just the feeling of no one's hearing me and I have no say in my life. But I love what you said, which is a very strong trait to have, which is adaptation. And it's how we humans have survived throughout centuries, as we've adapted to whatever experiences, good, bad, or ugly, indifferent, whatever. And so I personally want to just commend you for that. And I know it seems like, thanks, Captain Obvious, what else was I going to do? But there are a lot of people that give up and they just fall down and just say whatever. But you've maintained not only your innocence, but also now you took that pain and your experience to now help others. And I'm all about that. Anytime we go through something, And it does make you an expert. And you can say you're not an expert, but I say we are experts in any pain that we've experienced that we can bring forth to help others in. So you are an expert, my friend.
Okay.
So tell us about your books. I mean, my goodness, you have written 10 books. Wow. Are they fiction, nonfiction? I can't wait to read them.
I started in 2014 there, which with Salt in the Milk, 10 years in Istanbul, which is essentially a collection of kind of writings about music, which I used to do. I was a music writer and interviewer, journalist, and I was essentially like a reporter in Istanbul on the acts that were coming there and the views of those acts. And so, with the online world, everything sort of feels like it's just like sent out there and you don't know what's happened to it. Well, I'm a bit more precise than that, like you might recognize, and I collected it all. When I got back, I said, right, well, I'm going to publish this just to make sure that it's not lost, basically. Not that anyone necessarily reads it, but to make sure it's not lost and you've got a tome there on the bookshelf, And I published it, and it was perfectly successful. It wasn't sort of J.K. Rowling, but it's a perfect sort of example of those 10 years. And it's called sort of Salt in the Milk because the Turks will have a drink called kind of ayran, and it's a yogurt and milk drink, yogurt and water drink, and it looks like milk basically. When I saw this guy putting salt in it one day at the restaurant, and I said to my girlfriend at the time, I'm like, what's he doing there, putting salt in his milk? So it's not milk, it's ayran. And so I felt a little bit like that, and it had that kind of is an interesting metaphor because of how you misunderstand a culture because of what they're doing.
Ooh, I love that. I really love that. First of all, I love all foods and I love trying new stuff. So I'm always game to try anything. So I'll have to try that drink.
Have some ayran.
I love any kind of cuisine that's unique and different because I always like to try new things. So I want to know, you said so many really, really neat things, and I want to say it, but I want you to say it. And one of the questions, guys, on my questionnaire is what helped you overcome the traumas you faced in life? And I don't know if you remember what you said, Sean, but I really loved your answer to that, as well as the one thing that you never knew. So what is the thing that you now are at this place in your life and you're like, I didn't know, but I needed that experience to now go forth and use that? What was the one thing you never knew?
I suppose I never didn't know that you can be in such a place, in such difficult places, but still have the resilience of the inner locus. These buzzwords get on my nerves because I don't like buzzwords in culture like resilience and all the rest of it. However, they do often have a truth to them, and you do see that just stripped down to your core self, you will be okay. And when everyone around you is saying things have gone terribly, well, it's up to you if they've gone terribly or not. And things are just an opinion; they're not fact. So it's up to you to decide the facts and your facts. That's not like it's not like totally designing the truth for yourself, which I don't agree with either. But you are allowed to define your own how you handle things. You don't have to take other people's versions of that. I think that's what I'm trying to say.
Yes, I love that. I love that. Anything that anyone says is just an opinion, not always fact. And a lot of us growing up have been programmed that when someone says something, I take it to heart, it must be true. And I so appreciate that you said it's not always a fact. And it can be, this is my favorite line that you said, and it's there to be accepted or disregarded as you wish. And I think that's everything, right? It's life that comes at you. We receive 150,000 pieces of information in our brains daily. Like our brain is wired neurologically to delete or distort. And so think about 150,000 pieces of information a day. We do it all the time. But when it comes to emotional reactions, we just suck it all in and we store it in there. If we were better at distorting and deleting some of this stuff, that people say or media says or beliefs of others. I'm with you on the buzzwords. I'm just going to word salad and start creating my own words because I don't want to be a conformist and I don't want to be one of those coaches that says what everybody else says. And but I totally agree with you. Sometimes there are no other words to describe it. But what you learned when you say resilience, you learned it about yourself. And that's you gotta wonder, this is my belief, why I asked for certain experiences. And you could go to this extreme of what you're going to with this experience and say, would I ever have believed in my resilience and my ability to adapt had I not had this experience? And I'm not saying it's something we love and something we're like, hey, give me this. I want to be, in prison for 4.5 years, or I want to be, in a near death a car accident. I'm not saying we ask for it, but I do say when we have them, I feel as if, and I'm getting kind of philosophical, but I do feel as if I needed it. And when I get to a point of appreciation for what it was, no matter how bad it was, then I know I got that lesson and I can appreciate that I asked for the experience. Maybe not the exact experience, but at least I asked to learn that thing. Do you agree or disagree?
I think there's a lot of truth in just exactly what you just said. And it's sort of destiny, isn't it? Fate. These words, which are now so unfashionable and whatever else, but they are anciently acknowledged things. I didn't expect this to happen. I didn't expect to be a person with a stammer and all the rest. Everything else that happens in our chaptered lives, right? And the thing is that, like, not to want to go too political on it, but the culture now is so inured, so safety conscious that people are terrified of anything actually happening, anything interesting happening. And so, yeah, I didn't die through this experience. I wasn't a war journalist. A thing happened which I regret, but wasn't a crime in the way that I was prosecuted, right? So that I can accept some responsibility for that, which I did in court, but I won't respect responsibility for things that aren't true. And so that was the thing that we came to. And you can't. That is actually a part of life, and it came to a part of being human. The judges in that accepted all this. What happened was a result of being human. And so when you look at it that way, you go, well, the result has been dreadful. It's been life destroying because of the media more than anything else. But now I'm going to handle it in my own way and have it as a chapter, I guess, and then go on to the next. And speaking to you right now is part of the next chapter, not that one.
It is. It is. And you think about it, you would never have advocated for an innocent project or innocent people had you not been in those shoes. I would never be an advocate to help domestic violence victims if I had not been through it. And I think in today's society, we listen more to people who've been there and experienced it. I think you and I'm a little bit older than you, but our generation was considered the unsupervised generation. And we didn't fear things like you said. There's so much more fear and anxiety and panic attacks because we really weren't wired by our parents to fear things. We were told to just go out and do it. Come back when the lights are on, the street lights are on. But we would just go out and explore and do things with no supervision. And I think it gave us a little more gumption to be risk takers, maybe, and to explore. What do you think?
Oh, I completely agree, and I don't want to come across as a traditionalist too much or anything like that. But there are some good things that are lost, and having the sense of adventure that you mentioned and everything, is completely true. The fact of, let's say, abductions or stuff like that, the sort of reason that the kids aren't allowed out in the way that they used to be is those stats, and those stats aren't any more than they were back then. It's just that the media is so keen to report on one little incident, which will then become this massive national story. I'm sure you have it over there. We have our own ones because I won't even recognize the names because they're still very national specific, except for the guys in Me Too. So we amplify these things into massive things, which give parents understandable anxiety because everyone's terrified for their kids. But the reality is that the majority of abuse happens internationally inside the home. And I'm sure you're aware of that more than anybody else. And that's a very uncomfortable stat for people to actually recognize. But it's not about your kids going out there and getting dirty in the streets. And any dirt that they're eating is going to be good for them. But
Right.
all these things are just ignored by Big Pharma and by the media. And you start to sound like some sort of politico on a TV show, but I don't mean to. But yeah,
No.
I agree with you basically.
hey, it's our show and we can say whatever we want. We can get on
Right.
any soapbox we want to, but I do think we have information overload, and I think you're absolutely right. The stats, just because it seems like the stats are what they are now does not mean those stats would not have been that way in the 80s when we were growing up. We just didn't know about it. It just wasn't reported, and there were so many more restrictions on freedom of speech and what was reported, and plus there was a lot of other stuff going on in the 80s that that they were reporting on, so those were like pushed off to the side. So I really, really love that. I feel that here in America, and I'm going to be on my soapbox for the last moment, I feel we kind of are going backwards. And I think laws are determined by individuals. I feel like the United States has 50 different countries. We do not have 50 different states because every single state has a different law. And I think it's just absolutely insane that we are supposed to be one country today, the day of freedom, when we pulled away and became a country. I feel like we've pulled apart more than we've pulled together. Don't come for me, everybody, if you're offended. I'm not being a non-patriot, but I'm just saying I want us to come more together. And in light of the Supreme Court making a judgment yesterday on a hypothetical case being able to discriminate against LGBTQ people, we just went backwards. Roe versus Wade, however you feel about that, I just feel like when we make laws, and tell me how in the UK, if you have similar situations, we make these laws, they become laws, but they're not really ever in stone. They're never cemented, and you can never count on it being staying that way. There's no level of comfort, and maybe that's the increase in anxiety that we may be experiencing in society. How is that in the UK? Similar?
We haven't got a constitution here in the way that you do. Happy Independence Day, by the way. What we've got is the precedent on the Bill of Rights, which goes to 1689, so it's 400 years old. But what we have is a precedent in law. So if a thing happens in law, it gets kind of written in Hansard, which is a big, thick book of law. And then the subsequent kind of lawyers in cases will refer back to that precedent to have ideas about how to judge a next case, which is similar. So that's how we operate. We don't have a gun law, for example, like the controversy that you have. So we're very aware of all the arguments that you talk about. When it comes to things like LGBT, we have some issues there where we are probably the most tolerant country of such things in the world, of kind of racism, isms, all the rest of it. Britain is very, very good on this. But you wouldn't think that from the left-wing media, who basically are always trying to push things to say that we are a terrible bunch of bigots, and all the stats say that we're not. And unfortunately, with the trans part of LGBT, the fact that they're being taught in schools there are 76 different genders is making a big problem for the parents of this country, because they're not being asked if they want these kind of things to be taught. So it's like back to the creationism thing. And also, if a kid decides they're going to be a he, but they're a she as far as the parents are concerned, the country's saying we want the parents to be told, but people like Stonewall are saying, no, we're not going to tell the parents. And the country is freaking out about this right now as we speak, as I'm sure is happening over there. So with that part, with the LGBT, we have some issues. I'm a pro-trans guy. I respect trans rights, but I'm very trans activist skeptic, because the activists are all in positions of power doing certain things without checking. And Dylan Mulvaney, etc., the country's going, hang on. And the hang on, I don't think is a bad thing, but I'm still totally equal rights across the board for everybody. So that's where I come from on the soapbox there for you. I'm not sure if it works.
No, that was fantastic. Thank you. You gave me some understanding. So my question is, so everything that's written in the book, and then they can change it. Do they change it as much as possibly we do here, or state by state, county by county? How does that work to change the laws in that book? Is it harder to do that in the UK?
Well, it's just it's actually it's just a record of the words that were spoken at court. So that gets put in the book, and then the legal scholars will go through to check the previous sort of kind of cases along that. So if we have a Harvey Weinstein case here, like an equivalent, then the next people, like Mr. Kevin Spacey, is on trial here this week for similar things. So whatever happens is talked about in his case. The next time something similar comes along, they can refer back to Spacey kind of versus the Crown to see what was written and apply that to the next thing. So that's how that works, and it's just a kind of collecting book. It's not you can't particularly rewrite it. Well, I hope you can't. You're not supposed to be able to. It's just a record of what's happened, which you refer back to for a possible way forward, as opposed to having anything set in stone like you guys do.
Gotcha. Forgive my ignorance. They do not teach about UK politics nor royalty issues
have the same thing with you guys here. So
in our social studies courses. What is the difference between the royal side of it and how do they make the laws or rules that are to be stood by versus, say, your prime minister and your legal system? So that's where my ignorance and confusion comes in. What part of that, because we've got branches of the government, right? Judicial and all that. So help us understand. Listeners, I know you love this question. We love the royals. So help us understand a little more clearly how everybody has a role.
Right. After the execution of Charles II a couple of hundred years ago, had his head cut off by the visiting socialists who came down to the Houses of Parliament, it was decided that the royals and the commons that the royals couldn't have any effect on the commons, and so since then the royals have no political power. But what they do is each week they meet with the Prime Minister for a briefing. And what they talk about is completely secret. And the country still kind of runs on some sort of a stitch up. But I mean, you don't actually know. But the thing is that even the Prime Minister can't do anything because he has to get a bunch of things through Parliament anyway. So there's a system of all this stuff. And we do listen to the monarch, but the monarch's not allowed to talk publicly on politics. So everybody knows King Charles is very green and very into architecture and stuff like that. But now he wouldn't necessarily come out broadly and say, I support Greta Thunberg, not Donald Trump. He couldn't say that sort of thing now. But he might have done that back in the 70s. So that's how the balance sort of works. Everyone's watching Prince William to see what he does. And for some reason, we've basically disowned Prince Harry because of Meghan Markle, which is all utterly tabloid. Of course, it's huge in your country, it's huge here. I'm not a non-royalist because they're a part of our DNA, and I got lots of sympathy for Harry because of his red hair. He's very sort of antsy everything. He's like King Henry VIII or something, But and the story is all very compelling. But also, if you're going to sell the story and destroy your family the way he has, don't expect too much sympathy because you don't bitch on your family, So there's this other aspect to it. Like I say, I'm probably not as much of a royalist as some of your listeners, but I'm happy to educate them on how it works, if that works.
I love that. That is fantastic. I had no idea. So the royals do not have say in politics. They meet with the prime minister, and the prime minister is able to bring it to the parliament, and then that's how the rules and the laws and things that need to be changed. But I just love how
I'm just got to jump in there to say that they don't have any power they can't even bring anything to the House of Commons. If they did that, the parliamentarians would say, did you hear what he said? They couldn't say that. They can just have his ear, that's all. They can't affect policy.
Okay, that's like seriously old school. Like grandma's
Yeah.
like our grandparents were like, don't talk about it. You sweep it under the rug. Just, you can have an opinion, just don't talk about it. So
Mm.
I
That's how Britain still works.
I was just gonna say I so sweet, and I've met quite a few of you, and I just think everyone wants the same thing. And I say this is one of my taglines, is we're all saying the same thing. We just want to go through life having success and abundance and happiness and love and joy, and there's just so many things that get in the way of that we prevent our own love of this life and enjoyment and creation of this life. And you, my friend, are such a shining example of, no matter what comes your way, whether it's stammering, whether it's being falsely accused, no matter what it is, you can still be creative. You can still be jovial. You can still be loving. You can still be kind. And I just think you're a shining, fabulous example of how we can all live our lives. Listeners, I hope you appreciated my friend Sean, and I thank you so much for appearing today with me. I've enjoyed this immensely.
Thank you. It's been a delight as well. I couldn't agree more.
I love it. Well, listeners, that's going to wrap us up for this week of I Never Knew. I hope you loved my precious Sean, our little Britain friend, who we are going to stay in contact, and I want to do a follow-up on what's going on with him. Go find his TED Talk. Do go watch his TED Talk, and let's get him 1 trillion views. And stand up for yourself. I think the bottom line of this is speak your truth. No matter whether anyone's listening or not, still speak your truth, because at some point someone will hear you, and you can get either the justice or at least the satisfaction of being who you are and what you deserve in this life. So go create that life. Of course, I do life coaching, and anyone who's looking for life coaching, these are all things that I work on you with as well, letting go of some of those limited beliefs you have about yourself, or some of those ancestral bonds and generational traumas that we do tend to carry forward. So self-esteem, self-confidence. If you've been through some trauma, we work on healing. So find me at lifecoachmaureen.com. And go find my books on Amazon. My dog is more enlightened than I am, and my dog is my relationship coach. And again, all of these things we talk about, my discovery of how to love myself unconditionally and be my own best friend through that trauma I had been through, seeing it through the eyes of my dogs, changed my life. And for those furry babies, don't forget, mydogiseverything.net. We make healthy treats and fun things for your babies. So love you all for listening. Keep subscribing, keep sharing this, keep growing this community. We're hoping today Sean is going to have all of his British friends come and join us, and we're going to explode in Britain because of Sean. So we want some more of our friends across the pond. Happy Independence Day to everyone. Whether you live in America or not, I think every day should be Independence Day. I appreciate you all. Keep the 5-star reviews coming, and we will see you next week. Please take care of yourself. Take care of each other. Most of all, please take care of those furry babies, and adopt, don't shop. We'll talk to you next week, guys. Bye.
Thank you for tuning in to the I Never Knew podcast. If you found today's episode inspiring and educational, please be sure to follow, subscribe, and spread the word. The more people that join the Inc. community, the more it can develop and influence others as we work together for a healthier and brighter future. Until next time.